Okay. First of all, good afternoon. Thank you to be here to participate on this debate. This is SED hearing, a methodology for gender mainstreaming in the EU budget. Is the second hearing that we organize as SED. During the first one, we had the opportunity to have the Director General for Budget to explain to us which were at the time the intentions of the DG budget. 1 hour later, I think that we have the opportunity to have other colleagues to explain to us where we are, what was already done, and I'd like start to thank everybody to be here. Maria from our political group from SED, Maria is the coordinator, the SED coordinator in FAM, in the committee FAM. Thank you very much to be with us. And also our speakers, the 3 speakers, Irena Mozova. Thank you very much to be with us. You are the director in charge of Equality and Union Citizenship. You are the director for Justice and Consumers. And for me, especially, it's a pleasure that you accept our invitation, because we were both integrating the first group of women nominated heads of representation of the European Commission in member states, me in Lisbon, Irena in Prague. So we had the opportunity at the time to work together, and I remember very well that during the heads of representation meetings, we tried always to introduce this topic in our debates. I'd like also to thank the representative of the Commissioner Dalli, Lesia Radeliki, member of the Helena Dalli cabinet, and also the head of unit in DG budget, Bernard Wendisch, who is in charge of performance and policy mainstreaming. Thank you very much. And finally, we will have the closing session, and either Guardia Zabal, either is the coordinator of the SED participation in budget committee. Thank you very much also to be with us. The SED group wants to see gender equality enshrined not only as a horizontal principle, this is an acquis since a long time, but as a practices in all of the European policies and member states. Of course, gender equality has not yet been achieved in practice, and the Socialists and Democrats, the SED group, and in the end of the day, the European Parliament, fought hard for the promotion of gender equality as a horizontal principle in the framework of MFF 21-27. And during these negotiations, equality between men and women was agreed as a horizontal principle of the budget. Why I underline equality between men and women and not gender balance? Because Poland refused, gave a veto to use the expression gender. So we need to accept, and it was a last-minute concession that we made. If it was not the case, Poland gave a veto to the MFF, so it was a very difficult moment, but in the end of the day, we agreed this principle, and this is very important because it's not only a political ambition, but it's also in the interinstitutional agreement, European Parliament, Council, Commission, we could agree in the creation of a methodology to be sure that we have gender budgeting. It means the EU budget can promote gender balance, and this is very important for us, and we need to be very active and very attentive, because the Commission already agreed with us that you will do it with pilot projects, and we go ahead with this objective, but we need more and more understand what the Commission is doing and which are the results. So a new gender expenditure methodology has now been developed and was applied for the first time in the context of the 2023 budget adoption procedure. What we propose today is to examine how the methodology was developed and what were the constraints and challenges it faced under the MFF 21-27. Lessons learned for the post-2027 MFF proposal are also important. We also propose to assess how does the new methodology scoring system work and how was it applied in the context of the draft budget 2023. It is of utmost importance to increase transparency and accountability with respect to how the EU is spending its budget to achieve results and contribute toward the overarching policy objectives that benefit EU citizens, enterprises, and organizations. Conclusions on how to reinforce it to measure gender expenditure and foster gender mainstream still in 2021 MFF should be drawn. With a methodology, we aim at ensuring that gender equality considerations are systematically taken in account when a single euro of the EU budget is spent. That the methodology is developed and implemented, that the methodology is sound, transparent, and credible. In addition, we want that 2027 and at the end of the current MFF, we will know exactly how the European money was spent to reduce gender inequalities and how gender equality was promoted. I start with some technicalities, so we can listen to and speak in English and French. A question and answer session follows. In the Q&A, please raise your hand, and when you are given the floor, address your question to a speaker if possible. So, we open the session with Maria Neukel. The floor is yours. 5 minutes if possible.
Ganz herzlichen Dank.
Thank you very much. I'm not going to need 5 minutes to say what I have to say. Dear colleagues, thank you very much for inviting me today, giving me the opportunity to speak. I think it is very important that I thank Margarita. Thank you very much for bringing this issue of gender mainstreaming and gender equality and gender budgeting. Thank you very much for bringing that onto the agenda in the Budget Committee. It really does show how important this issue is, so thank you very much for doing that. It is, of course, decisive here. Who gets what money? What measures are implemented? How the budget is composed? What the political priorities are that are set? It's very important when we're looking towards the future, and that is why it's important that women and gender equality is at the forefront of our minds, to make sure that they get the money given to them that they should be, and to make sure that we can all play our role in developing and shaping the budget. Of course, gender mainstreaming is something that always needs to be at the forefront of our minds. But how can we do that? And that is where we always come up against hurdles. And that is why we need to have a real exchange of views between the experts who know the budget inside out, and also those who are experts in gender issues, and that is why we're having this meeting today. So thank you very much for inviting me here today. We're today talking about gender equality in the Budgetary Committee, because you have to follow the money, because money means power. And so it is very important for us to shine a light on this. Thank you very much for inviting me here today, and thank you very much for this hearing, which I'm sure will really give us impetus moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Maria. Now I move to Irena Mozova. As I said, Irena is Director for Equality and Union Citizenship in DG Just. The floor is yours, Irena.
Thank you very much, Margarita, and thank you very much, honorable members, for inviting me and actually for organizing for the second time the hearing focusing on this important topic. And let me only maybe come back to the history, because as Margarita was speaking about the different processes when we've been fighting together for having women and then gender equality being mainstream in the different policies and different areas. Also the gender budgeting was very high on the agenda of this House. And I still recall under the previous commission, where we have been pushed by the European Parliament as a commission to do something imminently and to really also honor the legislation, which is the funding instrument for us in order to honor the legislation, the treaties, in order to put gender mainstreaming, gender budgeting very high on the area. So I'm confident that this House, also with this hearing, is again focusing on the progress. And let me only say that we in the Commission, we are really very much adherent to and committed to gender equality in general. Let me only underpin that this commitment has been fixed again, and also somehow addressing the comments and criticism from this House about the lack of. So from 2020, we have now the gender equality strategy, which was adopted just before the COVID pandemic in March. And while this strategy is covering many interventions in the key areas, so for example in gender-based violence, but also women's equal participation in labor market, but also the possibility for women to lead in the society. So the key role of the gender mainstreaming, and more specifically gender budgeting, is clearly enshrined in this strategy, and it is clearly one of the priorities of Commission of Ursula von der Leyen. Now, the development of the methodology for tracking gender-related expenditures in the EU budget has been rather long Commission exercise. And again, let me recall the history still before this Commission. So we started with the sharing of the best practices with certain services that been more advanced, like that time DEFCO or colleagues in ECHO, External Action Service, because they've been already tracking and they've been already using kind of the methodology. And already then, so we engaged with our colleagues from DG Budget in order to progress in this exercise, to actually develop in the future, and this is now the exercise that my colleague Bernard will be speaking very soon, the clear methodology with inputs from the experts coming from OECD, which has the most developed methodology, but also from the EIGE, and I believe that an expert will be speaking a little bit later on, because this is one of the important tracks of EIGE as well. But also European University Institute in Florence, and last but not least, of course, the European Court of Auditors, because they have a very important say in that. So you will very soon hear from my colleague from DG Budget about the constraints and challenges we face in the development of the methodology under MFF 2021-2027. And these challenges, we can name it, so data availability, IT solutions, gender equality related interventions. So there are many different, and Bernard will be much more eloquent than myself to speak about them. But we are, as I said, so really committed to improve the reporting and strengthening the gender dimension in European Union budget. We have launched the Commission-wide gender-relevant data mapping exercise, as well as a pilot to strengthen the gender dimension also in selected programs. And again, I refer to the future presentation by my colleague, Bernard. In more specific terms, since I'm coming indeed from DG Justice, so we are at the forefront of these efforts. For example, let me inform you that in the current programming period, so we have had dedicated programs serving the gender equality, and we will also be looking forward to post-2027 MFF in order to apply the common agreed methodology. Now, next to this, of course, we are focusing on strengthening gender mainstreaming in general. And there are several ways how we can accomplish it. So first of all, through the training. So let me only say that in Commission, so we have a dedicated task force that supports the Commission work on the equality mainstreaming, including the gender mainstreaming. And the trainings on the gender mainstreaming are offered to all Commission staff now. So this is a novelty and is also comprising the elements on the gender budgeting. Furthermore, so we support also developments and implementation of the gender mainstreaming in policy and funding in the member states. And within the margin of the technical support instrument, a flagship project entitled Gender Mainstreaming in Public Policy and Budget Processes was launched. And this flagship led to a multi-country project with participation of 7 member states. And this initiative shows that there is an interest among member states to take measures to strengthen gender mainstreaming, including the gender budgeting. And let me only say that we are, as a Commission, behind the gender equality mainstreaming group. So it is a high-level group on gender mainstreaming where we meet with the member states regularly, once per semester. And the gender budgeting topic is on the agenda of our meetings since, I would say, 5 years already, precisely focusing on sharing best practices, but also when the MFF negotiations already started, inviting the member states to look into the best opportunities to focus on or to follow the money, as honorable member stated, in order to give the best way of use it in the benefit of gender equality, but also in a way to find a sustainable way and structured support for that. And for this, so we are also exchanging good practices through so-called mutual learning program. And for example, in 2020, the Slovak Republic hosted together with Czech Republic and Austria, and of course supported by the Commission, a mutual learning seminar on gender mainstreaming and gender budgeting in the European Structural and Investment Funds, ESIF, and also national budgets. And we also work with the best possible experts, so also in the margin, for example, of the Advisory Committee on Equal Opportunities for Women and Men. And we tasked this advisory committee to produce an opinion exploring how member states work with the gender mainstreaming of national budgets. And again, so this was followed by the very good exchange of the practical tools and the lessons, because also the European budget is very much connected with the implementation on the national side. Now, let me only say that there is a very long way ahead. The COVID pandemic and more recently also the war of Ukraine and its impact on overall policies, but also economies of the member states and the European Union as a whole, bring considerable challenges. And these challenges make it even more important to ensure that gender equality is taken into account in the economic recovery processes. And many member states have used the recovery funds to invest in areas that promote gender equality in different ways. We just discussed it with the member states at this meeting of a high-level group, and Bernard was also with us there in order to show how advanced we are at the Commission level. So let me only reassure you that despite the fact that we are not yet there in terms of the gender budgeting, but we are there in terms of the sustainable progress, in terms of the methodology and the pilot progress, we are sincerely committed. We are committed to work very closely with the European Parliament, also with the Member States and Council, in order to achieve soon really fair balance in terms of the spending in the benefit of the gender equality and in benefit of women in the whole European Union. Thank you.
Thank you, Irene. Thank you very much. Now I give the floor to Bernard Wendich. As I said, Bernard is the head of unit budget performance and policy mainstream in DG Budget. Bernard is the head of unit in charge of developing and implementing the methodology to measure gender-relevant expenditure at programs level in MFF 21-27. And Bernard will share how this new gender expenditure methodology has been developed and was applied for the first time in the context of the 2023 budget adoption procedure. The floor is yours, Bernard.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you very much, honourable members of Parliament, for the invitation. It is very timely because, as Irene already pointed out, we had a high-level working group at member state level, chaired by the Swedish presidency. So I think it's a very good moment, in a sense, to also share this with the colleagues in the Parliament here today. I've prepared a couple of slides. Perhaps I can have the first one. Just to say what I'm going to talk about, and Irene has already kind of hinted at that, so just a little bit about the development of the methodology, what it looks like, the application in the draft budget process in 2023, where when the Commission adopted the draft budget 2023 in June 2022, this pilot methodology was used for the first time. And basically then focus a little bit on what the open issues are and what the Commission is planning to do in that case. Can I get the next slide? And the next one. So perhaps to start with the development of this methodology, I think we started together with DG Just and together with the Secretariat General around the time when the Court of Auditors did its work on gender mainstreaming in the budget, to think a little bit about how to organize this, and we went for a very inclusive process in terms of developing that methodology. So, and I think the context therefore is one of cooperation also with the Court of Auditors, where basically there were a lot of discussions that were happening at that moment in time between Commission colleagues, between the Court of Auditors, with EGE, with the OECD, with the European Institute, to kind of lead us to the state that we had. And this was consolidated in a final Commission consultation inside the House in March 2022, during which this whole construct was finalized. In that context, we obviously identified a number of challenges, and those challenges were mainly due to the fact, so if I could get the next slide, please, due to the fact that we were looking at an MFF that had just been adopted. So in a way, we had to work with the legal basis that we had, and those legal bases, in some cases, did include provisions for gender equality. Mainstreaming, in many cases, did not include any kind of provisions, apart from perhaps a recital restating the article where gender equality of the treaty, where gender equality is enshrined. But therefore, we have a number of constraints under which we operate, mainly, I think, linked to data indicators. So a lot of questions around how do we know what the state is of affairs right now, and that's something that is really a concurrent issue. By the way, it's not just an issue for us. This is an issue also in all the member states. I think every single one who intervened in last week's meeting at the level of the member states say that this is an issue. I think this is well understood. I think our IT systems right now, you may well be aware that the Commission is changing accounting systems. So again, there is a big movement where I think we have an opportunity to improve, but obviously, while that system is actually not there yet, we are also a little bit limited by what the old system can do. And I think we already also have a number of existing tracking systems. So Irene already mentioned the RELEX family is already measuring with the OECD system their contribution to gender equality. So we need to kind of ensure that we are aligned here. And I think, as MEP Marquette already mentioned in the beginning, it's limited right now to the equality between men and women for the reasons that were mentioned. Obviously, we are very attentive to the fact that there are other inequalities and discriminations, but there, in a way, all the issues that are highlighted right now, they will be multiplied if you go into further dimensions. So if we look a little bit about what that methodology now looks like, so 2 slides further on. Thank you. So we have basically, I don't know whether people here are familiar with the OECD DAC methodology, so what the OECD is applying in the context of developmental aid. There's the score 0, 1, 2, where basically the main idea behind this is 0 does not contribute, 1 is an important contribution, and 2 is a main objective. It's an intent-based methodology where basically 2 and 1 are really contributing to gender equality. They make a positive contribution. EIGE has suggested 2 additional scores, 0 star, which you see here, where the idea is that under the current system, we don't have actually sufficient information to analyze. So the only thing that we know is this is spent in an area where basically budget interventions have an important fact on gender equality. So if we get this right, we could have a potentially important contribution to gender equality. The problem is that if we don't get it right, we don't do anything, or in the worst case, we could obviously even go in the wrong direction. So these are areas of attention. So I think this is really something that we brought into this methodology because of the constraint that we are working in the current MFF, where the legal bases are set, and we therefore do not necessarily have the possibility to say this is good, this is bad. The only thing that we can say is, look, we know that this money is spent in an area where there are potentially important impacts on gender equality. So let's be careful, let's look at this, let's analyze. And here is, in full transparency, this is all the programs that contribute in this area. What we have not taken up, and this has been an area of criticism that we've received, is the negative marker. So there's actually the possibility to have negative effect. We believe that, given that this methodology is supposed to not just be applicable in this specific MFF, but should ideally also in some probably improved format be carried on into the next MFF. We believe that we don't want, as a budget, to finance things that are negative for gender equality. So we believe rather in an approach in a similar way as we do for climate, in a do no harm. And the idea would be to operationalize that in a way that we actually don't need a negative score. In principle, in the current, as I already highlighted, in the current system, we cannot guarantee this. And that's also why any analysis that we now do has to then kind of translate the outcome of that analysis and the findings into the new programs in order to actually operationalize what we want to do in that area. Can I get the next slide and one up? Thank you. So this is just to show you what this means. And I think the left graph has been in the annual management and performance report, so that you may have seen. The right-hand graph I'm showing in basically all the presentations that I do, but was not actually taken up. On the left, you see the number of programs. We have roughly 40 programs, and basically you see here what the maximum score is that they currently carry. So there are basically 5 programs that have dedicated actions with targets on gender equality. So in there you have things like the development program, so NDICI, you have things like the Daphne Strand, so you have the JUST program in there. So there are programs where actually at least part of the program is really dedicated, has objectives on gender equality. In score 1, you have programs where basically there are actions where we know that they've been designed in a way that they will positively contribute gender equality. Horizon is an example. They don't necessarily have any specific objective on gender equality, but they do design calls in a way that actually furthers and improves on gender equality. So they get a score 1 in the best case. And then you see we have a number of programs that are 0 star. Those are programs where we don't currently have the information or capacity to analyze yet. And I come back to that in a second. And then you have score 0. Those are programs that we really believe there is no gender angle. So nuclear decommissioning, forgery of euro coins and banknotes, So there's some very limited, specifically targeted programs where we believe that the gender angle is not important. You see that from a budgetary perspective, basically the bulk of the expenditure sits currently in Zero Star. And that's obviously not an ideal situation because that obviously limits the usefulness of this analysis as in the first year. But the fact is that here you have to understand that most of what you see in these things is that the three big programs, so RF, CAP, and cohesion, they already make up basically most of that pie. And in all these three areas, for the simple reason that, for example, in cohesion programs, there was no operational program approved, actually not even until the end of last year. So by definition, we don't know what gender equality is going to look like. In the CAP, basically, we just have a new CAP approved that has started now. CAP strategic plans were approved only last year. Again, the gender angle is very difficult for now because we just don't know. Although we are very well aware that the CAP actually operates in an area where gender equality is an important consideration, it's just that we don't know yet how it's coming. And in the RAF, where we are working on, and you have seen the study of Ege to see how that is going to come out of that 95% bucket. Can I get the next slide, please? So on that methodology, we have received and elicited a lot of feedback. So we had the ECHA annual report on performance. It was published in November last year. They have recommended to refine the methodology and strengthen the minimum criteria. We've accepted this recommendation partially. There are some alignment questions, but I think in principle we have no issue with it. There was a joint session of Cont, Budget and FEM committees in the Parliament. There was the recommendation made on negative impacts. We had a discussion on that point. The strict adherence to OECD minimum requirements, I think that point has also been raised by Ege, also comes back in the ECHA. I think here what we have, again, tried to explain, we are not adhering to the OECD minimum requirements in this MFF, because basically what these requirements would say is that none of our programs, bar perhaps one or two, would actually qualify at all for gender equality. So we could not actually show that graph that we showed before, for the simple reason that it lacks legal objectives. Now, the legal texts were already done when we started, and I think we still can do actually a lot with gender equality, even in the absence of a legal objective in the text. So we believe that that requirement is overtly restricted in this MFF. It may be different next time around when we had the chance to actually embed it properly in the MFF. We had a technical workshop with colleagues from Parliament, Council, and Member States. That was very interesting. We received quite a few questions, but no actionable feedback in the sense that nobody said, look, this is stupid, do something different, or look, you should improve that or this. So right now, we've analyzed this. For the moment, we will apply the same system next year, so this year, sorry, again in an update in the summer, and we run another cycle of the pilot. And again, there will be an opportunity to provide feedback, and we will see what we can do going forward. Can I have the next slide and the one afterwards? Thank you. So what are we going to do going forward? So beyond the thing that I've already said. So I think for us, a big focus is the next MFF. There's, as you know, in terms of timing, we are only 2 years away now from the next proposal, at least if the timeline of the last adoption of the MFF is any guide. That means that we need to do the analysis now to understand what we need to do better next time. So what we've done is we've started data mapping. I already explained, no, we have problems with data. We need to understand what data we need in order to actually know what we want to ask in terms of data requirements in the next MFF. This is something that we also want to do. So the Court of Auditors has said, do a mapping and use what you already have, clear. But I think the gaps will be very important in order to understand what we want to do better next time. There's a link with better regulation. The Toolbox 2021 actually shows that it improves the idea of integration of gender mainstreaming into the relevant programs. From my perspective, given that the Commission has said that basically gender equality is relevant in all but 8 programs, in a sense, that means that in most of the impact assessments, there should be gender equality treated. That will be a big step forward and a big change from what we did in the past. So I think this is really something that that I think we will focus on. And there's a big angle, and here Irene has already kind of mentioned quite a few initiatives on capacity building. Right now, this is a new, I mean, I'm sorry to say this, one shouldn't say this in 2023, but this is a new priority. So, so in a sense, the fact is that actually there's still many colleagues who implement programs on the ground who do not know how to do this. And so it's really important from our perspective that we don't just have that pilot, but that we also couple this with training for the people who implement on the ground, training for the people in the member states that implement this, training in the agencies. And I think we have worked beyond also the training that is open to all Commission staff on gender mainstreaming. There's also specific training for program implementers, so the people that actually do this on the ground, for budget mainstreaming specifically, where we work again with the EUI in Florence to kind of see how in specific projects this can be done, so that people are getting sensitized, that they understand the challenges, and that they understand also how to look at this practically. We are also working with a number of DGs. Now, I've already mentioned the big programs, CAP, regional funds, to look what we can actually do in terms of this big bulk of 95% of Zero Star, because we would like to move some of those out and say, look, here we can actually do something, we have done something, we believe that this money is actually spent with gender equality in the mind, even though in the legal basis it may not be that clear. We are working here, we're expecting first results in 2024. This is a lot of work, and it's obviously ongoing at the same time as the operational programming, the CAP strategic plans. So I think there will be a little bit of a delay, unfortunately. So it will not be this year, but next year for the first results. And then, as I mentioned, last point, no integration of all the findings that we've had into the new MFF proposal. I stop here. Thank you very much for the invitation, and I do apologize that I will have to leave, but my colleague Joanna is going to be here for any questions that you may have. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Bernard, to be with us and to share what you are doing. We have already some questions. I know that you need to leave, but your colleague will have the opportunity to answer to some questions that we noted during your presentation. But thank you very much. So now I move to Lesia. Lesia Harliki. You are the expert on gender equality in the cabinet of the Commissioner Helena Dalli. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam Chair. On behalf of Commissioner Dalli, that is not able to join us here, I'm here to speak on her behalf because the issue of gender budgeting or gender mainstreaming in the budget is an important one for the Commissioner. And I would like to thank the S&D and the 3 MEPs here at the table for pushing for this issue, and not just today, but already more than a year ago, Commissioner attended your meeting to discuss and exchange on this issue. Now, the two colleagues before me from the Commission have already presented quite a wide range of issues that I also wanted to mention, so I'm not going to repeat and waste precious time, but maybe I would like to highlight some of the issues. I think that one of the issues is the momentum. I mean, we have started the mandate with clear political guidelines, with a clear strategy where gender mainstreaming in all the fields, so including in budget, but also in policy fields, has been put forward. And I think that we need to continue on that wave of, let's call it enthusiasm for gender equality. There's been a strong call from the European Parliament as well, and not just a call, but demands to have gender equality as part of the MFF, the RRF. So we have your support and your ally, you as an ally to continue working together on improving what we're doing. There was also mentioned the Court of Auditors report that was critical towards the European Commission on what is being done in terms of gender equality in the budget. And I think that from what you've heard, this has been picked up and is now being translated in the pilot project that has been put forward. And then there is the existing good practices within the member states. Irena Musova has mentioned a few, but I'm also happy that the presidency, the Swedish presidency, has put it on their agenda and is trying to also mobilize other member states to exchange best practices. So the momentum is there, and we need to continue on that path to set the tone for what is coming, because I think that that's important. We're only 3 years into this mandate. I know we could do much more, but we are setting good steps. And now we need to make sure that they're set in stone so that we continue building on and we keep on improving. The other point that I would like to highlight is the importance of data, and that's something that the Commissioner always says, no matter what the issue is, when she talks about combating violence against women, when she talks about women on the labor market, when she talks about pay transparency. Data is crucial. Without the data, we don't know. Of course, it also depends on indicators in certain programs or certain actions. And so that is certainly an area that needs to be improved. And we heard it also from the colleague that is from DG Budget. But the other point that I would like to mention is indeed the political importance and priority we're giving to budgets that actually translate the priorities of the Commission. We started the mandate saying that the green and digital transition is a priority of the Commission. Indeed, but how do you translate it into budgets that don't leave anyone behind? So indeed, this pilot project looks at that, but also the crisis, as was said before, the multiple crises that we went through. We need to make sure that the money that is invested to get out of this crisis, either with immediate actions or long-term with RRF, that the gender equality angle is taken into consideration. Also there, the RRF was there was a window of opportunity, thanks also to the Parliament, and it was a first step. We are very much aware that this is only a first step, but we are seeing the first steps, and we need to encourage them. Yes, there are already some good practices, like the very specific programs that target gender equality issues, like SURF with the Daphne strand, as was mentioned, like the international programs with NDICI, that is actually very much more advanced than what we're doing within the EU. So we can also use that as an example, but also within GAP, where certain programs are being supported for women in farming, or also Horizon Europe that has programs that or that looks at how gender equality is being impacted in some of the programs. So I think those elements are important, and are important for the next steps to take as well. As we heard, the biggest part of the budget, the 95%, that is scored as likely but not clear yet, there we will need to look more into detail indeed how we can improve that, so that we have a better picture on how we spend our budget and that it doesn't leave anyone behind. And then the last point, the one of the training, indeed, that exercise of gender budgeting should not be one that is done at the very end and quickly we try to fix it, but that it's part of everybody's approach in addressing the programs, addressing the analysis of the programs and the budget, and then the overall budget of the EU. I cannot stress enough the thanks or the gratefulness for the support from the Parliament on this issue, but also the colleagues from the DG on making sure that we were able to start this pilot project and actually maybe that was not mentioned, but more successful than what we had originally thought. This was going to start with only a few, and actually we seem to have taken more DGs on board than we originally had planned. So let's look at it from a positive side, and happy to listen to the critical points coming soon. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Of course, it was very important for us to hear from you your points, Irene, Bernard, Lesia, and I think that I can say that we are more than supporting. We are pushing to have to give to the EU budget more capacity to promote gender equality. So thank you very much from this side. Now I move to Ana Alexandrino. Ana Alexandrino is online. She will make his speech remotely. And I welcome Ana Alexandrino. Ana Alexandrino is the representative from the Portuguese managing authorities working on cohesion policy programming and implementation, with the mission to coordinate the regional development policy and ensure the general coordination of the European Structural and Investment Fund. Madame Alexandrino will share with us the national views on the implementation of methodology. Ana, bem-vinda. The floor is yours.
Hello, good afternoon. Thank you for inviting me to this hearing. My presentation will focus on our experience in the cohesion funds, especially regarding to the 2021-2027 programming process. To better understand what changed from the past cohesion funds period, one needs to say that gender budgeting hasn't had an effective impact yet. So there was a specific amount programmed for two thematic objectives. Unemployment thematic objective, we had one investment priority that funded mainly technical support to develop equality plans in enterprises and public administration. And on social inclusion, the investment priority 9.3 was used to support specific instruments to protect domestic violence victims, namely teleassistance, electronic tagging, and also together with some calls to fund public campaigns and emergency houses. This was made together with training of strategic groups like police and judicial professionals and healthcare professionals. And so to deal with this issue and support NGOs, entities that work on this area. So if we consider only the amount directly related to these priorities, the programmed value is quite small. Is, as you see, 0.3% of all cohesion funds and less than 1% of the Portuguese European Social Fund. With the small, specific analysis on the intervention fields, allocation doesn't increase this figure. And there were no other element besides secondary theme related to gender equality. So we can say that we tried to calculate a figure to gender budgeting and the result was unsatisfactory. Next slide, please. Just a quick remember to the Annex 1 of the Common Provision Regulation that establishes more than 150 intervention fields or dimensions for the type of intervention for the different funds. These examples are from the recent Common Provision Regulation that you may know. As you can see, each intervention field has a specific contribution to climate change on the first column and to environmental objectives. Next slide, please. In the new programming period, the secondary theme associated with the gender equality was removed, and it was replaced with a specific table that measured gender equality dimension. And now our experience. We had some difficulties trying to coordinate and harmonize the filling in of this table in each programs. So how to fill in this table? We had some orientation, the idea that specific objective 4.3 was considered gender targeting. We knew that ESF fund objectives would be considered gender mainstreaming, and some other intervention fields would be considered also gender mainstreaming, but it wasn't an harmonized procedure. Besides this ESF Plus, the big thing was what should be counted, what should be considered, and how to develop this harmonized procedure. Being an agency responsible for this coordination, we had the need to have some elements to guide us, and now I would like to say that having these elements is key to implement and harmonize procedures within the operational funds, the cohesion funds, and when we need to talk with management authorities. On the other hand, this similitude with the climate logic was an advantage because people already knew what was the logic, so they could understand what was the idea. The difference is that, as you have seen before, in the climate possibility, you have, for each intervention field, you have 1% that is already defined in the annex. And here you didn't. But we have also in the climate example, the climate ring fencing, so the thematic concentration, which is not well accepted as such if we try to translate it to the gender ring fencing as such, I mean. Next slide, please. So following the same methodology, we have in the 2021-2027 programming period, we have also 1 out of 5 policy objectives that have specific measures on gender equality, 1 out of 37 specific objectives, and 1 out of 182 intervention fields. So gender mainstreaming may be considered in other intervention fields depending on the analysis, as I told you before. We share the AIGA methodology guide on gender budgeting with the management authorities. Some have had a closer, a broad understanding or comprehension, and some didn't look at it. So we had to have some guidelines for them to follow. We suggested some ERDF intervention fields that could be considered gender mainstreaming, taking into account the Excel file that I shared that is shared by EIGA with all intervention fields and proposals for coding these intervention fields. Since we weren't completely sure about the choices, and I think it would be very important to discuss these intervention fields and to settle in a final decision. We had some decisions that we made together with the management authorities, and there were other management authorities that were more ambitious and went beyond what we said, and that could be considered, this approach, an added value for the future, not only in Portugal, but also taking into account what has happened in other member states to understand why did people use some intervention fields and why did they classify it with gender mainstreaming or gender targeting codes. So, some examples. Everything that had infrastructure for early childhood education and care, we considered it to be at least 40%. Every time that intervention fields related to Just Transition Fund was type ESF would be classified as if they were ESF. And in technical assistance, for example, even if the fund wasn't ESF, but the program had some ESF measures, then it would be classified also as ESF, meaning 40% gender mainstreaming. Next slide, please. So just to finish, the European Institute of Gender Equality, EIGA, start to discuss ways to better make gender budgeting, and we were part of that discussions. And as we said on those occasions, it's quite a complex subject. And this is particularly difficult to implement if we consider that, and I'm sorry to say so, it's not an easy theme to discuss. It's considered too vague and difficult to put in practice, or in other words, quite hard to translate it into a pragmatic approach that management authorities easily apply. The Cohesion and Development Agency, where I'm from, in collaboration with management authorities, released some technical orientations, guidelines, and a checklist to ensure that gender mainstreaming was considered and will be considered in all the phases of the process. But we have to understand that after they implement this checklist, the gender issue is not issue. The gender theme is considered to be fulfilled, and making gender budgeting is more than that. Is trying to measure this presence of gender equality in the funds, which means that applying the best practice that I'm sure exists of gender mainstreaming and gender budgeting to our reality, Portuguese reality, would mean a major change and especially a huge administrative burden. We need to tell you that we received a recommendation of the audit authority to increase professional training in this field within the funds ecosystem, and this is already programmed for the 21-27. So, to conclude, I think we have different speeds. The member states are in different stages, and Portugal still needs to do the long path ahead. It's as I told before, it's important to have some guidelines from you, some specific examples, some good practices that could be applied, some examples of pro rata activities, and different experiences that could be translated into concrete examples, measurable examples. So I would say that to conclude, it's important to follow the climate procedure example. It's important to be pragmatic and have some way to measure, but we shouldn't try to, at the same time, overrule cohesion funds that are already too ring-fenced and too concentrated in different thematic objectives. Thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation.
Muito obrigada, Ana. Thank you very much, Ana, having shared with us your experience and what you are doing in Portugal with the European funds concerning gender budgeting. And now I move to the last speaker. The last speaker is Helena Moraes Maceira. Helena Moraes Maceira is the team leader of AG Gender Mainstreaming Unit. And as you know, the European Institute for Gender Equality is an autonomous body of the European Union, established to contribute to and strengthen the promotion of gender equality, including gender mainstreaming in all the EU policies and the resulting national policies, and the fight against discrimination based on sex, as well as to raise EU citizens' awareness of gender equality. AG mission is to become the European Knowledge Center on Gender Equality issues. We are all acquainted with Helena Moraes Maceira, who has been accompanying the development of this methodology since its very beginning. Helena, welcome once again. We would like to have your views on this new gender expenditure methodology that has been developed and was applied for the first time in the context of the 2023 budget adoption procedure. The floor is yours.
Hello, good afternoon. Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting EIGE to this webinar. Thank you to all the honorable MEPs behind this initiative, and of course, thank you so much to all the previous speakers. I would like to start by acknowledging all the work done and congratulating the Commission for putting forward the methodology to track gender equality expenditure in the EU budget, but also for its application in the context of the draft budget 2023. Extremely important that the Commission has rolled out the methodology, and we are now reflecting from the process. So our acknowledgement and congratulations for all the work done, including the strategy to address open issues still under the current MFF. In the next few minutes, I will present some findings from EIGE's research on gender budgeting and share 3 key entry points for enhanced gender mainstreaming in the MFF. And I will be using a PowerPoint presentation to support my arguments here. So please, the next slide. Thank you very much. The first entry point, as it has already been mentioned, is indeed the assessment of programs. This specific process of assessing and adding the markers to the different programs, the spending programs. Here, international experience reveals that to ensure that tracking systems produce accurate data, the alignment and fulfillment of minimum criteria is essential. I have put in this first slide the minimum criteria of AGES methodology to track gender equality expenditures in the EU cohesion policy funds, which fully in line with the OECD methodology requires gender analysis, gender-specific objectives, or indicators disaggregated by sex as a minimum criterion for markers 2 and 1, the ones that reveal the most or the more potential contributions to gender equality objectives. The assignment and the application of this minimum criteria opens indeed an opportunity to a greater consideration of entry points for gender mainstreaming programming across the entire MFF. And in this process, as has already been acknowledged, gender expertise is crucial to reveal the gender relevance of the spending programs and actions. And here we would need to do this assessment at the lowest level of granularity possible. And then, of course, ensuring high quality implementation of the assessment procedures. Next slide, please. Yes, I will use now an example from the UNICEF experience in the application of the UN gender equality marker to illustrate what I have just said in practical terms. And this means that this focusing on the assessment and focusing on the minimum criteria means that behind the codes and behind even the specific minimum criteria, all programs, outcomes, and outputs are assessed from the perspective of their contributions to the advancement of gender equality, using as a reference here, UNICEF is using their own gender equality continuum, which, as we can see, goes from programs that do not consider gender equality until those which have a transformative approach. The second entry point that I would like to present today, and which indeed might also help us to inform discussions about the next MFF, is our targets as the second entry point. And I will ask for the next slide, please. Thank you. Here, I'm presenting data from the OECD's Development Assistance Committee. This is data 2018-28 for the 2018 period. Where we see that the DAC members' support to programs specifically dedicated to gender equality and women's empowerment as their principal objective. So in Commission's methodology, this would be tagged with a 2, remains consistently low at 4%. This is the pink element in this graph, and since 2010 until 2018, there were no changes when it comes to gender equality as a principal objective of the programs. However, we can see in gray that the support to gender mainstreaming projects, or let's say gender mainstream projects, continues growing, or it grows from 2010 until 2018. It continues growing steady, and it's becoming higher and higher and higher. And this is also what the most recent data is showing. What this tells us is that two main elements. So the first one, a deeper understanding of what gender equality looks like in different sectors, but also, and together with the definition of concrete gender equality requirements for spending programs. And the third element, the establishment of financial benchmarks or targets, had led to increase of the share of programs with marker 2, in this case, programs that are gender mainstreamed, with marker 1 in this case. If we then mirror the EU context, we know that in the EU context, other tracking systems in place have been linking the specific systems, tracking methodologies, to a financial commitment in terms of a quantitative target for expenditure allocated to interventions that are deemed to contribute to the specific objectives. And here we are mainly referring to the climate change and to the biodiversity objectives. So if we would consider such an approach for gender equality, and only the assessment of the data or this decision can be supported, of course, and should be supported by the assessment of the data and the findings from the piloting exercises, then we know that there are different options available to be combined with the tracking methodology, and this would include specific incentives, measures, or requirements regarding the budget share for gender equality in the programming and implementation of the spending programs. Now I move to the third slide, please. Yep. And here I will present entry point number 3 with a practical example, which in a way shows that enhance gender equality expertise and the use of gender mainstreaming methods and tools across the MFF programs. It's a clear entry point, which is also a result of the implementation of the methodology. So we expect to see this also in a more obvious way in the years to come with different assessments, next steps of the implementation of the methodology. So all of the above, what I have just explained right now, I'm going to put it into practice by presenting a hypothetical example from the EU cohesion funds to demonstrate how operations, how projects might be designed emphasizing gender equality objectives to a greater or lesser degree. And this would illustrate how important the criteria and the level of granularity are in the assessment exercise. And specifically, if we analyze and link with the data that was presented to us, this would be key to better understand this 95% that was presented as, of course, spending programs with potential to impact the gender equality objectives. I will, and this connects very well with the presentation from Ana Alexandrino, from Portuguese Cohesion Agency, because I'm using the example of Intervention Field 148, this is the support for early childhood education and care, excluding infrastructure. So, as she was mentioned, in the guidance that the agency provided to Portugal, if I'm not wrong, they said that as a minimum, all the projects behind this intervention field would be categorized as 40%, so value 1 with a significant contribution to gender equality. This is indeed one of the proposals for the management authority to choose, depending on program design. The other approach would be that managing authority would select the two, would say, well, this fully contributes to gender equality and it wouldn't take place, this project and these operations wouldn't be happening if there were no to contribute fully to gender equality objectives. So this can be seen by increasing the level of granularity and look, for example, at the specific projects. My hypothetical project here is an operation, a project on the education of future nursery school teachers, aimed at increasing the number of educated personnel by retraining measures. So we would have one option in which the managing authority will present and design a project, retraining, where they will be offering retraining for all interested persons and decrease the lack of personnel in this field to contribute to women's labor force participation. Okay, so here we will stick with the 1. So this would have indeed a substantial positive impact to gender equality, 40%, 1. The managing authority can promote and present an operation, a project, which would be focused on educating men as nursery school teachers and decreasing not only the lack of personnel in this field, but also the imbalance between women and men and nursery school teachers. Here, the operations, the projects will be then categorized as a 2, because gender equality is indeed the principal objective and is designed with a transformative gender approach. And this is the connection with the gender continuum I mentioned before. So I'm completely aware of time constraints, so I leave it here. I don't go more in depth with examples, but yes, I want to conclude by reiterating our congratulations and the acknowledgement, to the work done by the Commission and also by the Parliament in the development and the application, which is extremely important. We are there already. We are already implementing the methodology, and this is a methodology that provides clear opportunities to maximize public policy interventions and resource allocations process to advance gender equality. And we know EIGE's evidence on the economic benefits reveals that this will ultimately result in longer economic and social gains for the European Union as a whole. So EIGE reiterates also its commitment to continue supporting this process, provided, of course, that resources are available. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your presentation. We know very well what you are doing, and since the beginning we are committed to find and to contribute to build this methodology. Thank you very much to share with us which is the state of the art nowadays, and also we heard your last message. So we move now to the question and answers Q&A part of the meeting. And before to start the Q&A questions, I'd like to remember that we had here around the table one part of the speakers coming from the EU executive power, namely the European Commission, together with EIGE. This is not by accident. Indeed, after years of hearings and seminars to push for the idea, the European Commission did put a methodology on the table for the budgetary year 2023. But Commission has many faces between the political inputs from the Commissioner and their cabinets, the specialists of what to measure in DG Just, and those on how to measure in DG Budget. We are glad to have today many representatives of these different faces to assess how they built the methodology and how they will continue to work on it. So now we have around 40 minutes if you need for debate, and we follow immediately for the Q&A session. After your interventions, we have some questions, and maybe I move to either to ask some questions.
Yes, thank you very much. I have two questions. One is linked to this zero star. Maybe for the Commission, but also for EIGE. What are we doing with this 95% on the budget that we don't know how to classify because we don't have enough information? Do you have any plan to improve this number? Because, I mean, having only 5% assets, it's not very easy to say or to see how the budget is helping or not the gender equality. And second question is also about these negative markers, because I understood that there are some discussion about it, and so I would like to understand what can be the positive impact of the negative markers, or why there is not included. And I mean, and this is an open question to all the speakers, because I would like to understand, because I also have some doubts, but I think it can help. So thank you.
If you can enter. Thank you.
First of all, thank you very much for the invitation to discuss and promote together what is a very important objective for the Commission, as already reiterated by all the colleagues. So on the first question, what is our plan for the 95%? First of all, I would like to explain that this 95% frustrating as it is for a technocrat not to be able to explain how this is going to contribute at this very moment, it is also a very big win in the sense that it's the first time that we have been able to establish that the EU budget is not gender blind. So it is already important that we have come to a number that substantiates the potential, the true potential that the EU budget has. So the next question is, of course, how are we going to tap on this potential? And this is the reason why right now we are working, we have introduced, as Bernard explained, gender pilots. These are pilots to try to strengthen the gender analysis and our understanding in the very end of the programs and see how we can reevaluate these programs. We have been working closely with all colleagues across all services in the programming and what is going to come afterwards, the implementation, to see how, even if gender analysis has not been conducted for these programs, this is why they fall under Score 0 star in reality, how, nevertheless, we can integrate at this stage the gender dimension. In these efforts, EIGE's work has been critical for us. What we have been doing is actually consulting all the work that has been done in order to establish, first and foremost, what is the relevance of the programs, identify the venues that can be used in order to mobilize the program in this direction. And then to support our colleagues, we have the Task Force on Equality that is supporting us. DigiJustice is also supporting us. So we are in close contact with all Commission services to try to steer the colleagues in how to introduce in the programming and in the implementation the gender dimension. And as it has been mentioned before, here it's very important to understand that we are all in a very steep learning curve. It's important to build also in the Member States and in the Commission the capacity that is needed in order to do this, because it's clear that the intention is there. There is a lot of enthusiasm also from our part, from all the colleagues that have been working on this, and now we're trying to make it real also under the constraints of this MFF. I don't know if any of the other colleagues want to add something.
Yes, just a small amendments, because everything has been said in principle from the budgetary point of view, but let me say something also from the policy point of view and from the point of view of legislation. Because as Bernard also explained in one of its first slides, so the changes in the better regulation. So you know that now, so in the Commission, so all the services that are bounded by the better regulations rules, which are comprising obligation to look into the equality matters as well. And this starts from the very first phases of the assessment, so from the impact assessment, but also when proposing the legislation. You just mentioned that the task force on equality, we have now the network of equality coordinators and each and every service. And in principle, so starting from the very beginning of the legislative processes, so they are looking into the equality angles of the new proposals of the legislation in order to address the potential impact on equality and gender equality more specifically. And therefore, so while okay, so we have the programs, we have Common Agricultural Policy, for example. Even for the programs, the impact assessments, so are being prepared, and therefore, so even the standard programs, which are not addressing the new legislation or the policy needs, they will have to now follow this impact assessment, looking into gender equality impact. And new proposals from the Commission, should it be in the policy field or on the legislation field, so they should also focus on comprising this gender equality dimension in the due way. Of course, so we still will have programs, policies, and legislation with simply no impact, but this will be then, as you mentioned, the 5% has been now indicated. It is the really minor part of the European budget for the time being. I don't know whether Alessia would like to add something.
So now I have also some questions. The first one is that the Commission is preparing MFF revision, MFF review, we never know, MFF revision for next June. You said that we take note that the methodology cannot be refined before the 2025 budget procedure. But my point is, can you advance something during this proposal, the MFF revision proposal, that the Commission will put on the table with new some innovations like the Sovereignty Fund and other political initiatives? Do you think that is the moment then that this capacity, the gender budgeting, can be stronger and can go deeper during this discussion? Do you think that we have room of maneuver to do it?
Let me say here that if you're talking about the refinement of the methodology, the real tools that we are working on is, as it was mentioned, the ex-ante impact assessment. So if we have new initiatives, to be able to assess already beforehand what their anticipated impact could be, and then also the performance framework. So what are the indicators going to be? What are the data requirements going to be? So the experience that we have had so far has been valuable in the sense that for all the coming proposals, if we have any in the current MFF and for what is to come in the next MFF, we now have a deeper understanding of what is needed. We now have the tool, the updated better regulation, that allows us to have a stronger impact assessment on the gender dimension. So all these are viable, but we are not waiting for 2025. Please take note of the fact that the two work streams that we have launched, which is on the one hand, the gender pilots, so to strengthen the gender analysis, and on the other hand, the data mapping exercise. These are very powerful tools because they are going to allow us to, first and foremost, have a more informed view of how our programs work and how they can promote gender equality, but also to identify what are the inherent weaknesses of our programs. And also, where are the strengths of our programs? Because right now, the European Court of Auditors, in its report, recommended that the Commission should make better use of the existing data. And this is true. So right now, we're trying to identify the available data, see how we can use them to further improve our reporting, but also to be aware of where we need to work on our weaknesses, where we have critical data that is missing, in order to integrate it in our future proposals. So we're already working now, we're not waiting for 2025, rest assured.
I have another question before I give the floor to others, is linked to data. As you said, there are some difficulties, and I know also that something is difficult to ask to member states to give more data. So we can't demand more bureaucracy to member states. But my point is, with MFF is shared management. With RRF is centralized, is direct management. Do you think that with RRF you can have more data to go deeper on this methodology on gender budgeting?
I don't know if any other colleagues want to intervene. For us, the first critical step is to understand what kind of data we need. We are operating in the Commission under the Better Regulation toolbox, which sets two principles when we are requesting data, and this is relevance and proportionality. So under this light, when we are looking at the additional data requirements, and this goes for all programs, we first need to identify what is the administrative burden that this collection requires and entails. So also for the RRF, we had a very strong request by the member states to not overburden them with data requirements. And we need to understand that this is an instrument, the RRF, that was put in place in order to address a crisis in reality. And it is important when we have the national administration striving to tackle an unprecedented crisis, not to impose data requirements that would actually work against the purpose. which would be to bring back the prosperity for all, leaving nobody behind. So for all the future data requirements, and this is why this data mapping exercise that I mentioned very, very important, we first need to understand where exactly, in which domains is the program relevant for the promotion of gender equality. For instance, in the RRF, we have the twin transition, which is prominent. Here we need to understand, in green and digital, for instance, what data do we have and what data are we missing in order to understand how we're contributing? It could be that we have this data and we're not fully exploring them. Or it could be that we're asking for some data and they're not that useful. There are other angles that we need to take into account. So we need to first gain a better and deeper understanding of what's at stake and what we need to assess, and then on this basis, review the future. Please.
And I can also complement, despite I'm not an expert on RRF, that also thanks to the European Parliament, so we have now a very powerful tool because the RRF regulation actually requires member states to explain how the measures of recovery and resilience plans contribute to gender equality and equal opportunities for all, and also mainstreaming of this objective. So we are very happy to have this very powerful tool. You know that we have now, at least currently in all the adopted recovery and resilience plans, so we are counting 131 measures already being considered being adopted with focus on gender equality. So this is those are the data that we are aware as of January. And let me only contribute by another aspect, because at the meeting with the member states in Stockholm last week, so we have agreed with the Swedish presidency to put on the agenda a specific point precisely on gender equality and RRF. And we have heard from the member states about the difficulties, about actually having a solid and structural planning due to the very shortage of the time. And you know that this is a very special and extraordinary instrument. We are not speaking, when speaking about the Recovery Resilience Facility, about an instrument which would be in the standard planning processes, but something which came new on top to address the crisis, and actually multiple crises, and therefore the member states, they've been simply not ready, according also to our colleagues and best friends working on the gender equality, actually to take a different view, so to a more sensitive lens in order to prepare those projects. And therefore, to have this requirement, to have the horizontal view on the proposals is extremely helpful. And I believe that with this experience, but also with this, I would say, not so positive experience, because we have understand that many national administrations were simply not able and prepared to propose projects, so focusing on recovery, but having also solid contribution towards gender equality. So this is a very good example and also experience to be eventually used in the midterm review, but also when we will be preparing the new MFF.
Well, sorry, I'm hesitating a little bit to take the floor because I don't want to sound like I'm repeating, but I would just also like to highlight the importance of having an equality commissioner at the highest, and so a political mandate at the highest level, because it allows us as a cabinet to be around the table with all the other cabinets when they are putting forward proposals, whether it's a communication, a strategy, a recommendation, and then call for numbers, data, indicators, gender mainstreaming. And I think that we can only be successful if we work at the gender mainstreaming approach at all levels. So that's what I was trying to also say in the beginning, that we today set the stones for also long-term impact on making sure that there is gender budgeting, gender mainstreaming, and more gender equality. Thanks.
Thank you very much. I'd like to ask who wants to take the floor here in the room.
Hello, I am Magdalena Zapala from the Research Service European Parliamentary Research Service, EPRS. I have a question to colleagues from the Commission about the actually starting already the procedure for the annual budget 2024. Are you working on a new material for which will be included then in the documents in the budgetary procedure? Can we expect something new in comparison to the 2023 budgetary procedure? Are you going to take into account some experience of the last procedure, and will it be different, or it will be basically almost a copy-paste exercise from the previous year's documents? Thank you.
Thank you for your question. Just to recall what happened in the previous year, so in draft budget 2023, so that we're all on the same page. So in the context of the draft budget, in the program statement, so working document 1 of the draft budget, we had as an annex the overview of the methodology, so explaining the fundamentals of the methodology. But also we had in the individual program statements a dedicated section on gender mainstreaming and how the programs performed towards gender mainstreaming. This included on one hand the table with the financial contributions, which was based, so it was actually the attribution of the scores per budget allocated or sub-budget allocated for each program. And then you had the explanation of the relevance of the program and how exactly it was performing. That's what we had last year, and it was a novelty compared to all the previous years. It was the first time that we implemented the methodology. So this year, there will be no novelty in the sense that the methodology is going to be implemented without any modifications, same as last year. It's going to be the same as last year, again in a pilot, which means, again, we have our ears and our eyes open to constructive input in order to see whether modifications that are feasible under this MFF would be possible. What is going to be different is that the methodology is designed to follow the life cycle of the programs. This means that we have now started entering the programming and in some cases, limited cases, the implementation of the programs. So what you will start seeing is the analysis and the scores are going to be updated. So you will not only have the budget for 2021 as last year, you're going to have the budget, the commitments under 2022, and then you will have the analysis of how this was reflected in the programming of the programs. So it will not be just based on the performance framework and the legal base of the programs, as we had in the ex-ante analysis that was included last year, but we will also have how it was actually put in practice by the programs. Thank you.
More questions from the room for speakers being here or remotely? The floor is yours.
Hello, Rosamund Shreves, also from the European Parliament Research Service. I have two questions. One from the point of view of staff and training. I'm interested in hearing a little bit more about what you're providing for the staff. It sounds as if you have a general sort of introduction on what gender responsive budgeting is, and then much more targeted training for people that are actually kind of doing budget work. Is that mandatory? Is that something that people are taking up on a voluntary basis? And the other question that I have, I can't remember what the other question was. Oh, yes, about the administrative budget. So Parliament is thinking of a methodology for its own administrative budget, gender responsive budgeting. Is that something that the Commission is considering from your point of view? Thank you.
So yes, with regard to the training, now we have two different trainings that are complementary. The one is on the policy mainstreaming of gender equality. And this is a general horizontal training. And then we have what is a recurrent specialized training that was launched in 2022. And this is a training that when it was first developed, so in 2022. It was targeting primarily Commission officials who work on budgetary issues, who work on the programming and the implementation of the programs and the financial aspects of the programs, as well as the quality coordinators that Irene just described their role. So it's the screening of all policy initiatives and legislative initiatives in a respective DG. So the training was actually tailor-made for these people. It's not just a general introductory, let's say, training. This training was developed specifically having in mind the needs of our colleagues. So it provides an overview of the fundamental concepts, let's say, for gender mainstreaming and gender budgeting, but then goes into detail to explain how exactly these are reflected in the everyday work of our colleagues. So we had, as I told you, we had a first round of feedback, as Bernard explained. We had a technical workshop with the member states and the council, the colleagues in the parliament, where the feedback that we received and actually the dire need that was underscored everywhere was a need for capacity building also in member states, in implementing partners, in programming authorities. So what we are now trying to see and explore is with AUI to see whether we could widen the outreach of the program to target also member state officials, colleagues who work in agencies, and offer this training as a support to them as well. With regard to the administrative budget, now the Commission has undertaken what we call the quality plans. So we are trying to embed, further embed gender mainstreaming in our practices. This also reflects in our administrative processes. We are not in any process right now to have an internal methodology for our budget to see our administrative expenses, but we are trying definitely to establish a gender mainstreaming approach also across our own practices, internal practices.
Thank you. I have two questions for the speakers remotely. The first one is to Mrs. Alexandrino.
about it, and we are 8 years later just starting. So this is how to approach. Are we doing what we really need to do, or are we too late? Are we really motivated to improve what we are doing? Again, the same with this embryo of methodology, because at this moment I'm not sure that we can call a full methodology. But on this 95%, we are very far of having a really gender budgeting and gender assessment with 95%, where we can feel that there could be an impact on the gender mainstreaming, but we still don't know. So we all know, and this is the never-ending story, when we are asking to have this gender budgeting, this gender mainstreaming, everybody says, well, this is very complicated because we don't know exactly what kind of methodology we can use, and we are lacking of data, we are lacking of means, we are lacking of everything. So for us, as part of the co-legislator, it's almost impossible to ask and to give a mandate. But then, as we don't have a mandate, we cannot develop the strategy, and we cannot develop the methodology. So we enter in this never-ending story that in a certain moment we will have to break. And I'm really proud. Margarida was in the lead of the MFF, and I was responsible of the RRF. Then, little by little, we are trying to break this circle, but we are really far away of what we need to say that in the European Union there is not only a political priority, but there is a technical reality that we are including in the budget and in all the regulation. But I'm always trying to be optimistic. Otherwise, I would have left this house long time ago, especially working in budget, because we are always, we never have enough money. This is every little step is always very painful, but little by little we are succeeding. So I want to finish in a positive mood. And I took note from, I forgot your name. Yes, that you say we have better knowledge, we know how to do, we can identify where are our weakness. So I really hope that this is the way that we are going to do it all together, because, and you know that the Parliament is not only supporting, but we are really asking for it. And this should be a mandatory condition for all the programs. And I hope that we are not going on to wait for the next MFF, that we are going to improve things in this revision. I don't know if this is feasible, but maybe from the European Commission, you can ask to include mandatory gender data to be taken. Of course, always if they are relevant and we know. But this is an extra comment from my side. What a surprise that we are always talking about administrative burden when we are talking about gender. This is not by coincidence. Then when we give €1 to a civil organization, we ask them 3 audits for €1. But this is not administration burden. But when we are talking about gender equality, this is always administration burden. So let's try to be firm on this. Let's try in this midterm review to mandate to all committees in our House to do this gender review in the regulation, and let's really put this as a priority, but as a mandatory priority, not only a will or a wish for the future. I really hope that we can end this mandate saying that we really move forward, not only for on a starting point, but really on a good track. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Aider. as I arrived in the Parliament a bit later, it means this is my first mandate. I'm maybe more optimist than either. Share with us his optimism at the second part of his conclusion. But I'd like to say that you have our support. This is clear. I know your house. So I can understand that you have sometimes a lot of political will, but the political will is not enough. But what we can say is that you have the support of the Parliament, because it's something that we are asking to, and we need to have it. It means for us, what is very difficult to understand is we have ambitions, political ambitions, and finally, we can't remain only on the speech. It means we need to have concrete actions and to show that our political ambitions can achieve results. This is our point, and I'd like to thank very, very much you are here sharing with us what you are doing and sharing the optimism of either. I think that it's I can say it's a starting point. So, but we need to generalize, to disseminate this work that you are doing. But I understood that Irene also wants to add something.
Thank you very much, Margarita, and thank you, Eider, if I can call you Eider, for those words. First of all, let me thank you for the consistent support and also consistent push. I think this is something that public administration is really in need in order to progress in the topics like gender equality, which is not obviously as a first thing on the mandate. So this is something extremely important, and I'm really very grateful for this consistent, long-term, ambitious support and push at the same time. Now, you have said that you are not very sure whether you are positive or optimistic. I can reply by the half full, half empty, but let me make a kind of the paradigm, so looking at the Luxembourg Gare, because there is a train station. So during the time you've been referring to 2015, so we've been probably standing together at the platform. We knew where we would like to go, but we had simply no means. Today, you refer to it as an embryo, so we are not anymore on the platform. We are sitting in the train. The train left the platform, is maybe not on its full speed yet, but it has a clear target, so we know where we go, and it's gaining the speed gradually. And this is, again, so thanks to you, thanks to Margarita, thanks to many colleagues in the Parliament. I'm very grateful you have mentioned also the committees, because I think that your Parliament Gender Mainstreaming Network can be a very important ally to look into not only in the Budget Committee, not only in the FEM Committee, but in all the committees, so looking into the special policies and also the programs, because it is essential. And believe me, there are many colleagues, not only those sitting here now in the first row of your speaking table, but in the house, in the other house of the European Commission, wishing to progress speedily, steadily, and for the benefit, as I said, of the gender equality. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So you can close your meeting. Thank you.